Okay, last video for me about stupid Sonic Dream Team until the game actually comes out. I figured I should do a follow-up to that video where I actually talk about it more seriously instead of just joking the whole time. Especially considering, in general, just around and also in the comments of that video, I saw a lot of people obviously very upset about the situation, but also kind of not fully understanding the situation and getting upset about maybe the wrong things or in the wrong ways. And I also want to talk about what we can do about it. So Sonic Dream Team, obviously, I made my video where I was a little miffed about the situation, and yeah, I'm still mad about it. But specifically, I want to point out that what I'm mad about is the situation surrounding this game. I'm mad that there's a cool-looking new 3D Sonic game coming out, and I have to buy an Apple device in order to play it. That is the thing that I'm upset about, the situation, the fact that I just don't want to buy an Apple device. What I'm not mad at is Apple or Sega for this situation. I've been seeing a lot of people like, how dare Sega put this exclusively on Apple Arcade? This is so anti-consumer, it's this, it's that, blah blah blah. And I've seen these kind of complaints from people before about various things and just gaming in general. And something that I think is a big misunderstanding here is that this is not a scummy business practice, at least not in my opinion. Because if it wasn't for Apple and Apple Arcade, this game wouldn't exist. Apple probably funded the game, and we know that they've been involved in the production of the game, so very clearly this game was made for Apple Arcade. Like, most likely what happened was that Apple approached Sega and was like, hey, we want a big, full 3D real Sonic game for Apple Arcade. Will you make that for us? And then Sega said yes. And I don't think that's a particularly scummy thing to do. It's in Apple's interest to get exclusive games on their platforms. If we're gonna call that scummy, then every Nintendo game is scummy, because how dare they lock all these amazing Nintendo games to Nintendo platforms? Same for Xbox, same for PlayStation. Well, not really Xbox, because they put everything on PC these days. But you get the point. It's just exclusive games like every single console since the beginning of video games has been doing. In fact, this isn't even the first time that Sega has done these kinds of things with Sonic specifically. Back in the Wii U days, they had a deal with Nintendo to put 3 Sonic games exclusively on the Wii U. Turned out all those games were bad, and so nobody really cared, but it's the same situation. An exclusivity deal between Sega and another company, a platform holder, to put Sonic games specifically on that platform. But people weren't particularly upset about that at the time. But I think the big difference is that that was at least a console, and, you know, we all kind of have an understanding that you need a console or PC to play games, and many of us have multiple systems that can play games. But phones have kind of been, like, shoved off into their corner where, like, we all just kind of ignore them because they all have, like, fake, stupid bullshit games that only exist to extract money from you. And people typically only have one phone, so if a game is only on one platform or the other, then you just miss it, really. But the truth is that these days, the landscape of mobile gaming is changing a little bit with stuff like Apple Arcade, where Apple is making a real effort to have a platform for people to put real video games on them. You know, these days our phones are around the level of like PS2, PS3, something like that, so you can make real games for phones, and some people are doing that. So we all have to just acknowledge that we can no longer ignore mobile gaming the ways that we always have. So a game exclusively on a mobile platform is kind of almost just as legitimate as a game exclusive to a console or a handheld or whatever, as much as we don't want it to be that way. Like, yeah, a bunch of people are upset that there's a cool-looking new Sonic game exclusive to Apple Arcade, but if there was a cool-looking new Sonic game exclusive to the Switch, you just know that for some reason people would be a lot less upset by that, even though it's mostly the same kind of thing. Another thing I want to talk about, a lot of people I've been seeing saying things like, oh, it's a mobile game, it's gonna be all shitty with microtransactions and everything, but it's not. That's part of the point of Apple Arcade. None of the games on the service have microtransactions. They're just normal-ass video games that you can play. And in that way, I'm kind of glad the game is on Apple Arcade. Like, I've been seeing some people that even have Apple devices going, I hate that this is an Apple Arcade game. And I get that, you know, subscription services are bunk and everything, but as far as the quality of the game goes, I'm happy that this is an Apple Arcade game, because if it was just a general iOS game, it would be fucking microtransactioned up to shit, and then it would suck. I mean, more realistically, if this game wasn't made specifically for Apple Arcade, it probably wouldn't be this game at all, because it wouldn't be like a proper video game with a beginning and end. It would be some horrible, you know, game loop that's supposed to go on forever, and you grind to unlock the next event, whatever crap. I don't even play mobile games, I don't know how that shit works, but you know what I'm talking about. So, not only is it thanks to Apple Arcade that this game even exists in the first place, but it's thanks to Apple Arcade that it's allowed to be a real video game instead of a horrible microtransaction nightmare, so I'm at least glad it's an Apple Arcade game for that. Another thing to address is that a lot of people seem to be blowing out of proportion the exclusivity here in terms of cost if you want to play this game and you don't have an Apple device. You don't need to spend $600 to get an iPhone to play this game. You can get an Apple TV for like $70 on Amazon. So it's not that terrible, really, and if you really hate Apple in this whole situation, you're like, I don't want to support these scummy business practices, even though they're really not that scummy. You can always just buy a used one, probably for like $50 or $60, and then there's probably an Apple Arcade free trial, right, that you can use that, and then Apple doesn't even get any money, and you still get to play the game. So I personally really don't think it's that bad to want to get an Apple TV or whatever to play this game. You know, I saw some comments on my last video like, don't do it, that's giving them what they want, it's whatever, but it's like, I mean, yeah, that's exclusives, that's every single fucking video game platform of all time. I want to get a PS5 because I want to play Demon's Souls. I want to get an Apple TV because I want to play Sonic Dream Team. It's all about having those killer apps, those games of a high enough quality, and having enough of those games to justify your purchase of that system. And there are some other Apple Arcade games that I'm kind of interested in checking out, like World of Demons or Rayman Mini, so okay, $70 to check it out. I'm fine with that, and if it's not even that good of a game, whatever, I can just sell the Apple TV at very minimal cost to me. It certainly does suck that you have to have an Apple Arcade subscription, that you can't just buy the game and own it. But personally, it's not like I'm going to be playing this game for the rest of my life every single day, so I'll get Apple Arcade for 1 month, play it in that month, and then be done with it. That's what I do with a lot of streaming services. I'm not subscribed to like 9 different streaming services. I wait until there's a bunch of shows on that service, and then I get 1 month of it, watch them all, and then cancel the subscription. So, personally, I don't really find this whole thing to be that terrible, in all honesty. I'm just annoyed that I have to buy a stupid Apple product that I don't want to buy. I also did see some people mentioning, oh, well, you can emulate or do like a Mac OS dual boot on your computer or whatever. I didn't even know, is there Apple emulation? I'm not aware. I thought that, like, Apple was all, like, super locked down and those kinds of things don't really work very well. I'm not really familiar with that whole situation. Personally, I don't really think what they're doing here is evil or anything. They're doing what any console owner would do. They are getting exclusive games for their platform to incentivize people to buy their platform. And now they have what is, for me, the killer app that's going to make me buy in. But while I don't think that this whole situation is really that terrible, there is definitely one big caveat to this whole thing. Is this a permanent Apple Arcade exclusive or just a timed exclusive? Because I was actually wrong in my first video. There have been a number of Apple Arcade games to go to other platforms eventually, but there have also been a number that have never gone to other platforms, so it's kind of up in the air. I assume that Apple makes different deals with different developers and publishers of, we want this as a permanent exclusive, something like Rayman Mini, but something like the Way Forward game, Shantae, that eventually went to other platforms. So they're probably giving different deals to different people, and I assume one of the factors that determines what kind of deal you get is based on the game. Like Shantae and the Seven Sirens, that game was probably already in production at just, you know, it was the next Shantae game that Way Forward was making, and Apple was just like, hey, you want a bunch of money to put it on our platform first? But in the case of a game like Sonic Dream Team, it's pretty obvious that Apple has been involved in the very development of the game from the beginning. Like I said, this game was made for Apple Arcade, so in that case, Apple definitely has the ability to negotiate a permanent, complete exclusivity contract with this game. We don't know if that's what they did, but that is a possibility. And in fact, I would say it's a fairly likely possibility because on Apple's part, that would just be the smart thing to do. And if you look at other similar games, it seems like that may be the case. Like Rayman Mini, that smacks to me as another game that was probably made for Apple Arcade, and that has not gone to other platforms. And also, we have the other Sega games on Apple Arcade. None of them have gone to other platforms yet. And if you look at, like, just stuff with Apple Arcade, it really does seem like Sega is really in bed with Apple on this. So it is possible that Apple may have gone for a full exclusivity deal on Sonic Dream Team. And if that's the case, that is very worrying because, for one, subscription services and contracts and stuff, they run out eventually. When the deal on Sonic Dream Team runs out, then it's going to be pulled from Apple Arcade, and if that's the only place it's available, then it's just going to be gone at that point. Now you might say, hey, well from there they can start putting it onto other platforms, but not necessarily. Depending on how contracts are negotiated, it still might be that Apple are the only ones that own the rights to release Sonic Dream Team on any platforms. So if their contract with Sega runs out, then just nobody can put it up anywhere unless they renegotiate a deal once again with Apple and Sega to re-put it back up on Apple platforms. Stuff like that has happened with console games in the past. In fact, it's even happened to another Sega game on Apple Arcade. The Choo Choo Rocket Universe, that was taken off of Apple Arcade because the contract ran out, and are they going to put it up somewhere else? Is it just gone forever? We don't know. And so right now, for me, that's a big fear about Sonic Dream Team. If this is a true Apple Arcade exclusive forever, then that means that this game eventually is just going to disappear one day and no one's going to be able to play it anymore, and that is not okay. Our only hope with this is that's not what the deal was that Apple and Sega made, and that it is just a timed exclusive. It'll probably never be able to go to Android, but maybe it can go to at least PC, maybe consoles, maybe Switch, whatever they're gonna do. I mean, for all we know, maybe that's what every Apple Arcade deal is. Maybe none of them are true exclusives, but in the case of other games like Choo Choo Rocket, maybe the publishers feel like it's not worth their time and effort to put those games onto other platforms. Like, it's no longer on Apple Arcade, but do we really care that much about Choo Choo Rocket Universe? Are people gonna buy this if we put it on PC and Switch or whatever? Maybe Sega's thinking, it's probably not worth the financial investment, it's not gonna end up turning a profit, so we're not gonna do it, which is why maybe that game is just gone. This is all just speculation, of course, we don't know. Maybe they are working on porting that to other platforms, but that is a possibility. Maybe for them, or in the case of like Ubisoft with Rayman Mini, maybe their exclusivity is over, but they've just determined it's not worth it to bother porting that game to other systems, so they just haven't done it. And if that's the case, then this is where we can come in. This is where we can actually make an impact. If this is not a true exclusivity deal with Apple, then we as fans need to let Sega know that it is worthwhile to them to eventually port Sonic Dream Team to other platforms. We need to let them know that we will buy this game and that it will be profitable for them to do that. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. But don't be shitty about it. Don't go harassing people. Don't go yelling at, like, the developers or people at Sonic Team. This is a Sega issue. Talk to Sega, and don't just yell. You know, let them know that we want Sonic Dream Team on other platforms. Many people have already been doing that, but honestly, part of the reason I made this video was just to kind of boost that signal and say, make as much noise as possible about wanting Sonic Dream Team on other platforms, because that is the best chance we have of making that actually happen. In fact, if we're vocal enough about it, then even if it is a true exclusivity deal that they have with Apple, Sega may try to renegotiate the deal so they could eventually port it to other platforms if they think that would be profitable for them to do. So keep complaining, everybody. Keep complaining. Complain more and more, louder and louder. Just never stop. And before anyone even says, well, just don't buy into Apple and Apple Arcade, and then, you know, they won't make any money off of the deal and blah, blah, blah. That's not how these things work. If you look at the history of video game boycotts, none of them have ever amounted to anything. There's always too many people that go anyway. You know, speak with your wallet, they say, but the thing about that is that realistically that only works with buying things you want. not buying things you don't want doesn't actually make a difference. The only way to make a difference in those kinds of cases is to just complain endlessly, so that's what we gotta do. Another game worth mentioning is Fantasian, which is like a big, full, old-school JRPG made by the creator of the Final Fantasy games. And that's another game that screams to me that it was made for Apple Arcade, probably a similar situation, funded by Apple and everything. But it is looking like that game will be coming to Steam, so it is possible. One last thing I want to say in this video before I go, that a lot of people seem to be overlooking, and I feel that's a bit unfair and unfortunate, is good on Sega Hardlight. They've been making a lot of mobile games for Sega and Sonic for many, many years now, and this is kind of them stepping up to the plate. Now they get to make, like, a real, proper Sonic game. Not a Sonic mobile game, but a Sonic game, and that's pretty cool for them. I look forward to seeing what they're capable of with making an actual full-on real Sonic game after working on the franchise for so many years. Hopefully they manage to do a good job. They've at least done good enough of a job that a lot of people are both very excited and very angry about their game, so looking good so far. We'll have to wait until the game comes out to see how it actually turns out.